The Watcher in the Silver Wood. Twilight never truly faded from the realm of Luminare, where eternal dusk painted the sky in perpetual shades of lavender and silver. The ancient trees of the whisper-wheeled forest stood like silent sentinels, their luminous bark capturing what little starlight filtered through the canopy above. Neria Moonwhisper crouched upon a branch, her violet skin blending perfectly with the shadows of twilight. She had been the Crystal Court's most accomplished tracker for nearly a century, though in the timeless counting of her kind she remained young and inexperienced in matters beyond her duty. Movement to the west, she whispered to herself, her keen eyes detecting the telltale ripple of void energy that signaled the presence of the nightmares, those formless creatures that had begun seeping into their realm through tears in the veil between worlds. The Crystal Court had ordered her to observe only, to report back with numbers and directions, never to engage. But something else moved in the forest tonight, something that made even the ancient trees seem to hold their breath in anticipation. Neria's tracking crystal hummed against her chest, warning of a power unlike any she had sensed before, neither fey nor void, but something wild and primal that made her heartbeat quicken against her will. That was when she saw him. A figure moved through the forest with impossible grace, as if the shadows themselves had taken form and learned to dance, tall and cloaked in midnight fur, with eyes that gleamed like twin moons. He moved without sound, without disturbing so much as a fallen leaf. Thorn Ravenshadow. The name whispered through her mind without invitation, as if the forest itself had placed it there, the forbidden hunter, half spirit and half mortal, an outcast who dwelled in the borderlands where neither Crystal Court nor Void Lords dared to tread. The stories spoke of his cursed existence, of how he hunted the nightmares with such fierce intensity that even the eternal stars seemed to pause in their celestial dance to witness. Neria watched, transfixed, as Thorn raised a hand toward an approaching shadow. The air around him shimmered with silver light, as ancient symbols etched themselves into his exposed skin. The void creature lunged a mass of writhing darkness with too many mouths and eyes, but it never reached him. Thorn's movements became a blur, a dance of deadly precision that seemed more ritual than combat. The void creature screamed, a sound that sent ice through Neria's veins. Then it was gone, not destroyed, but somehow bound and diminished, drawn into a small obsidian stone that Thorn held in his palm. Magnificent, she breathed, the word escaping before she could contain it. Thorn's head snapped up, his moon-bright eyes finding her instantly among the branches. Neria froze, her training forgotten in the face of his gaze. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, they simply looked at one another across the impossible distance that separated their worlds. Then he smiled, a small curve of his lips that held neither warmth nor malice, but something far more dangerous. Recognition. Violet, on. His voice carried to her without sound, speaking directly into her mind. You watch with curious eyes rather than fear. That is rare. Neria felt her heart trembling against her ribs. The hunter knew she was there, and somehow she knew that. Her life had just changed irreversibly under the watchful gaze of the twilight stars. Shadows between heartbeats. Neria had broken protocol, disobeyed direct orders, and risked everything to follow the hunter through the deepening twilight of the Whisper-Weald. Her violet skin tingled with each step beyond the Crystal Court's boundaries, a warning from ancient magic that she was transgressing sacred law. They will strip my rank for this, she thought, yet her feet carried her forward as if pulled by an invisible thread. The hunter moved like water through the forest, sometimes visible, sometimes merely a whisper of movement ahead. Thorn Ravenshadow paused in a clearing where moonflowers bloomed in a perfect circle, their luminous petals unfurling in his presence. He knelt, one hand pressed to the earth, his eyes closed, as if listening to secrets only he could hear. I know you follow, Fey Tracker. His voice came again without sound, echoing in the chambers of her mind. Your curiosity burns brighter than your fear. Unwise, but interesting. Neria stepped into the clearing, abandoning stealth. How do you bind them, the nightmares? Her voice sounded thin compared to the richness of his mind speech. The crystal court believes they can only be banished, never contained. Thorn's eyes opened. Twin moons that seemed to reflect light that wasn't there. The crystal court knows less than they believe. Typical of those who hide behind walls of their own making. He stood in a fluid motion that reminded Neria of hunting cats. Why do you track me instead of reporting back to your shining masters, Violet One? She began, then stopped as her tracking crystal flared hot against her skin. Something comes, many somethings. The forest around them darkened as void energy pooled between the trees. Nightmares, but larger than any Neria had recorded, their formless bodies congealing into shapes that mimicked twisted versions of forest creatures. They hunt in packs now. Thorn's voice held no surprise, only a grim confirmation. They evolve, adapting to this realm. We should run. Neria reached instinctively for her crystal dagger, knowing it would be useless against so many. No. Thorn removed his cloak, revealing arms covered in spiraling silver markings that pulsed with inner light. They've been tracking me for days. This was inevitable. Watch, learn, or flee back to your court. Your choice. Violet One. The decision made itself as the first nightmare lunged from the shadows. Neria spun, her dagger slicing through void matter that reformed almost instantly. A second creature descended from above, but never reached her. Thorn moved like lightning between twilight clouds. His hands traced symbols in the air that burned with silver fire. Each gesture was both attack and dance, binding rather than destroying, weaving the chaotic energy of the nightmares into patterns they couldn't escape. Neria found herself fighting alongside him without conscious thought. Her movements began to mirror his rhythm, creating a counterpoint that complemented his power. When a nightmare circled behind him, she was there. When another tried to flank her, his hand pulled it back. The pattern, he spoke in her mind as they fought. Feel it between heartbeats. The void isn't empty, just differently filled. Something shifted in Neria's perception. For a brief moment, she saw what he saw. The nightmares weren't just enemies to destroy, but energies out of balance. Seeking form in a realm that rejected them, together, they bound the last of the creatures into Thorn's obsidian stones. When stillness finally returned to the clearing, Neria found herself breathing hard, exhilarated in a way she had never experienced in all her years of service. You fight well, Violet One. Thorn's actual voice, spoken aloud, was rough like stone against silk. Neria, she said, offering her true name without thought to consequences. I am called Neria Moonwhisper. His eyes widened slightly, the only indication that her gift of name held meaning to him. You should not have shared that, Neria of the Crystal Court. Perhaps, but she felt no regret, only a strange sense of inevitability. Will you teach me? How you bind them instead of merely fighting them? Thorn studied her, his gaze seeming to look through flesh and into the core of her being. The Crystal Court would call it forbidden knowledge, magic from before their reign, when spirits and fae walked the same paths. I'm already breaking their laws by speaking with you. Neria felt reckless boldness rising within her. What's one more transgression? His laugh was unexpected, a sound like distant thunder, soft but powerful. Return tomorrow, at the same phase of twilight. Come alone, and be prepared to unlearn everything your shining masters taught you. As he turned to leave, the moonflowers closed their petals in his wake. Neria watched him fade into the forest, wondering if she had just made a pact that would save their realm, or destroy her place within it. The strangest part was how little she cared which outcome awaited her, as long as she could see those moon-bright eyes again. Forbidden teachings. 7 twilights passed since Neria began her secret apprenticeship with Thorn Ravenshadow. Each evening she would report false trails to the Crystal Court before slipping away to the Moonflower clearing. Her violet skin would tingle with anticipation as she crossed the boundary into what the court called the Forsaken Wilds. "You're distracted tonight." Thorn's voice flowed into her mind as they sat cross-legged beneath the ancient spirit oak. "Your thoughts scatter, like leaves in wind." "The court grows suspicious," Neria admitted, her fingers tracing the patterns he had taught her in the soil, glowing faintly with nascent spirit energy. "Commander Solstice has ordered increased patrols along the western borders. They know something crosses between realms, though they suspect only nightmares, not me." Thorn's expression remained impassive, but his eyes, those impossible moon-bright eyes, softened momentarily. "We can end these lessons if the risk grows too." "Great, no." The word escaped forcefully, surprising them both with its intensity. Neria looked down at her violet hands, now marked with temporary silvery patterns similar to his permanent ones. "I've learned more in these 7 twilights than in 70 years of court training. I won't return to their half-truths and fear." He nodded once, then rose in that fluid motion that still captivated her attention. "Then tonight we move beyond theory. Come." They traveled deeper into the wilds than ever before, where the trees grew so ancient they had developed consciousness, their branches shifting to clear a path as Thorn approached. He led her to a pool of water so still it mirrored the twilight sky perfectly, creating the illusion of endless stars both above and below, the mirror of echoes. Thorn knelt at its edge, gesturing for her to join him. "When the first nightmares came, my ancestors would use this pool to understand their nature. To bind something, you must first know its truest form. The court teaches that nightmares are corruption incarnate without reason or purpose," Neria said, repeating the doctrine she'd been raised with. "A convenient belief for those who prefer destruction over understanding." Thorn placed his hand upon the water's surface, the ripples spreading outward in perfect circles. "Place your hand in mine." Neria hesitated only briefly before laying her violet palm against his. Their fingers intertwined as he guided their joined hands. Beneath the surface, the water felt neither cold nor warm, but alive somehow, pulsing with ancient awareness. "Open your mind," he whispered, his face closer to hers than it had ever been. "See what I see." The world dissolved around them. Neria gasped as her consciousness expanded beyond her body. They floated in a space between realms where reality was thin as gossamer. Before them hovered a nightmare, but seen from this perspective, it wasn't the horror she had known. Instead, she saw a being of pure energy, lost and confused, trying desperately to maintain form in a realm that rejected its nature. "They don't belong here," she whispered, understanding flowing through her like the water around their joined hands. "But they're not evil. They're displaced." "Yes." Thorn's voice anchored her as the vision swirled around them. "Something tears the veil between worlds. The nightmares don't invade. They fall through. And in their terror, they lash out." When they emerged from the vision, Neria found herself trembling, not with fear but with the enormity of understanding. She became acutely aware that Thorn's hand still held hers, that their faces remained mere inches apart, that his breath mingled with hers in the space between them. "The court would never believe this," she whispered. "They would call it corruption, lies. And what do you call it?" Nary a moon whisper. His voice was soft, but his eyes held intensity that made her heart race. "Truth," she answered, then closed the distance between them without thought or hesitation. Their lips met as twilight deepened around them. The kiss was gentle at first, then hungry with the passion of forbidden things. Her violet skin seemed to shimmer where he touched her, as if responding to some ancient magic that transcended the boundaries between their kinds. When they finally parted, breathless and changed, Thorn traced her cheek with fingers that trembled slightly. This path grows more dangerous. Not just for your standing in the court, but for your spirit. My kind and yours were separated for reasons lost to time. I don't care. Nerea captured his hand against her face. Show me everything. The court, the boundaries between our worlds, none of it matters anymore. The look that crossed his face contained both joy and sorrow. Then let me show you why the nightmares come, and what price must be paid to turn them back. As they rose to continue deeper into the forsaken wilds, Nerea felt herself balanced on the edge of transformation, like a star at the moment before it changes from one state of being into another, brighter and more dangerous than before. The burning price. The truth revealed itself in the heart of the forsaken wilds, where an ancient tear in reality pulsed with chaotic energy. Void matter seeped through like blood from a wound that refused to heal. Nerea stared in horrified understanding as Thorn placed his hands upon the rift. "This is how you bind them," she whispered, watching as the markings on his skin flared blindingly bright. "You take their essence into yourself. Each binding burns away a piece of my life force." Thorn's voice strained as silver fire crawled up his arms. "A hunter of my bloodline has always guarded this tier. When one falls, another rises. But I am the last of my kind." The revelation struck Nerea like physical pain. How long have you left?" His eyes met hers, sad, yet accepting. "Perhaps a dozen more major bindings, less if the nightmares continue growing stronger. There must be another way." Nerea's voice broke, her violet hands reaching for him before he could answer. A crystal flared at her hip, the court's emergency beacon. "They've found us," she breathed. "No. Worse. The crystal citadel is under attack." Thorn's expression hardened. A coordinated assault. The void creatures have never shown such purpose before. Something controls them now. I must go. Nerea's duty warred with her heart. We go together. Thorn took her hand. The rift, the attacks, they're connected. I can feel it. They raced through the twilight forest, the bond between them humming with shared purpose. When they reached the edge of the crystal courtlands, the sky had darkened to near night, an impossibility in the realm of eternal twilight. They're draining the ambient magic. Thorn's voice was grim, consuming the very essence of your world. The crystal citadel stood besieged by writhing darkness. Void creatures of impossible size attacked its shimmering walls, while court warriors fought desperately to hold them back. Among them, Commander Solstice directed the defense, her face hardening when she spotted Nerea with Thorn at her side. "Traitor," Solstice shouted over the chaos. "You bring the Forbidden One into our sacred lands. He's the only one who understands what we face." Nerea stood her ground, feeling Thorn's presence steady behind her. "The void tear has grown unstable." Thorn addressed the commander directly. "These aren't random attacks. Something intelligent directs them, seeking to widen the breach between worlds." A massive tremor shook the ground. Far in the distance where the tear in reality pulsed, a column of darkness rose skyward. "It's too late." Solstice's voice held genuine fear. "The barrier fails." Thorn turned to Nerea, his eyes holding hers with fierce intensity. "There's one way, to seal it, a final binding. The ultimate price." Understanding dawned with horrifying clarity. "No." She grasped his arms. "There must be another way." "There isn't." His smile was gentle as he pressed something into her hand. A small amulet of twisted silver. "Keep this close. When the stars tremble tonight, think of me." Before she could stop him, he kissed her once more, then turned toward the darkness rising on the horizon, his body beginning to illuminate from within as he summoned the full measure of his ancient power. "Thorn." Neria's cry echoed across the twilight realm as he walked away, straight-backed and resolute, toward what they both knew was his final hunt. Beyond the final twilight, the darkness swallowed the sky as Neria raced after Thorn, her violet skin luminous against the unnatural night. Court warriors fell into step behind her, even Commander Solstice, reluctantly acknowledging the greater threat that loomed before them all. He can't face it alone, Neria's voice carried over the rising wind. Whatever comes through that tear will destroy everything, not just the court. At the center of the maelstrom stood a figure that was neither nightmare nor natural being. A Voidwalker. Ancient texts had called such entities intelligences from beyond the veil that could shape the chaos of the void to their will. Ah, the half-spirit comes to face me at last. The Voidwalker's voice was 1,000 whispers speaking as one. The last guardian. How fitting that you should witness the merging of realms. Thorn stood before the massive entity, his silver markings blazing like captured stars against his skin. You miscalculate. Voidwalker. This realm rejects your presence by its very nature. You cannot exist here without consuming everything that makes it what it is. Then it shall be remade in my image. The creature extended appendages of pure darkness, each movement, tearing reality further. Neria reached Thorn's side, her hand finding his. Not alone, she whispered. Never alone again. His eyes widened in surprise, then softened with an emotion too complex for words. Around them, the court warriors formed, a perimeter, their crystal weapons glowing faintly against the encroaching darkness. The binding must be complete. Thorn spoke quickly. I can pull the Voidwalker back through the tear, seal it with my essence. But the nightmares must be contained first, or they'll simply reopen the wound. Tell us what to do. Commander Solstice stepped forward, pride temporarily set aside in the face of extinction. Form a circle, he instructed. Channel your crystal energy inward, not out. Create a net of containment while I prepare the final binding. As the warriors moved into position, Thorn turned to Neria. The amulet I gave you. It contains a fragment of my spirit. After this is done, take it to the Mirror of Echoes. What happens next will be your choice, not your duty. Before she could respond, the Voidwalker struck. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, shattering the formation of warriors. Neria felt herself thrown backward, crystal shards slicing her skin as she landed hard among the ruins of an ancient shrine. Through blurred vision, she watched Thorn engage the creature directly. His movements were no longer the graceful dance she had admired, but a brutal, desperate struggle. Each gesture pulled more nightmares into his binding stones until his arms shook with the effort. Now, he shouted to the scattered warriors, channel everything you have into the circle. All of it. The Crystal Court united in desperation. Their combined power formed a shimmering dome around the battlefield containing the remaining nightmares while Thorn confronted the Voidwalker at the tear's edge. You cannot bind me, spirit blood. The entity's voice shook the very ground. I am beyond your small magics. Perhaps. Thorn's smile was terrible to behold as his body began to glow from within. But I don't need to bind you. Only to ensure you leave with me. He plunged his hands directly into the tear. The silver markings on his skin flared blindingly bright, then began to blacken as void energy poured into him. He was no longer binding, but absorbing, taking the full force of the chaos into his own body. No. Neria screamed, fighting against warriors who held her back. Thorn. His eyes found hers, one last time across the battlefield. In that moment, she felt rather than heard his final words in her mind. Some prices are worth paying, Violet One. The world exploded in silver light. When vision returned, the tear had vanished. Along with it, the Voidwalker and Thorn Ravenshadow. Nothing remained but a perfect circle of ash where he had stood. Days later, when the court had begun rebuilding. Neria slipped away to the mirror of echoes. The amulet pulsed warmly against her skin as she knelt beside the still waters. "I choose understanding over ignorance," she whispered, placing the amulet into the pool. "I choose hope over fear." The water began to glow, ripples spreading outward in perfect circles. A voice that was achingly familiar whispered from everywhere and nowhere. "Between twilight and darkness, between form and void, I wait for you." Nary moon whisper. From the water rose a figure of silver light, not fully corporeal but undeniably present. Moon-bright eyes gazed at her with love that transcended death itself. How she breathed, violet fingers reaching toward the luminous apparition. The binding worked both ways. Thorn's ethereal voice caressed her mind. "I am bound to the void, but also to you, neither fully here nor fully gone, a guardian still but of a different sort. The court will never understand." Tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but of wonder. "Then we shall teach them." His spirit hand brushed her cheek, sending shivers of silver light across her violet skin, together as we were meant to be. In the years that followed, a new legend spread throughout the realm of Luminare, whispers of a violet-skinned fae who walked between worlds with a spirit guardian at her side. Together, they healed the wounds between realms, teaching understanding where fear had once ruled. And on nights when the twilight deepened to its richest purple, those who ventured near the ancient forests might glimpse them. The violet, Tracker and her silver hunter, moving like poetry through the trees, their love a bridge between worlds that even death could not sever. Some say, the storytellers would whisper, that even the stars themselves tremble when they dance beneath the eternal twilight. Not in fear, but in joy. For what greater magic exists than love that transcends the boundaries of life itself?